I'm LovelyMetalhead, and welcome to the next installment of Lovely's Introductory Guide for Young and New Metalheads. In my last video, I discussed some starting points for people to get into hard rock and heavy metal. Now I'm going to, in this video, give some personal specific album recommendations of hard rock and heavy metal that I think are either essential for people's heavy metal knowledge or were part of my own sort of shaping getting into heavy metal. A whole disclaimer on this series of educational videos, quote-unquote educational videos. This is all shaped by my personal experience of getting into hard rock and heavy metal, so you don't have to take all the advice in these videos, you don't have to take any of the advice in these videos. This is just something that I feel like is a helpful guide for other people. Now, for personal album recommendations, I have a lot. So this video is going to be split up into two parts. With that said, let's get started. The first album I recommend for people to get into is part of my shaping up getting into hard rock and heavy metal. One of my favorite bands, one of the first bands I got into in high school, Avenged Sevenfold. And this album is their self-titled album, Avenged Sevenfold. I got into this band in high school, like I said, back when MTV still had music on during like the daytime. Remember the show TRL? Remember that? That was when I first saw Avenged Sevenfold, of all places, I know, right? Some tracks off this album that I bring up though, Almost Easy, Lost is a good one, and Critical Acclaim. Go check out Avenged Sevenfold by Avenged Sevenfold. So the next album I'm going to recommend is Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Partially because I am of the belief that Black Sabbath are the first metal band to ever exist, like ever. I personally believe that heavy metal didn't start as a genre until Friday the 13th of February 1970 when they released the first album, Black Sabbath. Anyway, that being said, I also really like this album because it has a bunch of Black Sabbath classics that I feel like everybody, if they like music at all, would know. This is early Black Sabbath, where like their sound and I think a lot of heavy metal and hard rock at the time was more jazz influenced, and you can definitely hear it in this album, especially in the song Electric Funeral. That's very jazz influenced. Some other songs on this album, of course, are Paranoid, which is one of the most iconic songs of all time, which, funny enough, it was the last song that Black Sabbath recorded on this album. Of course, Iron Man, War Pigs, and Planet Caravan. The next album I'm going to recommend is Metallica's Black Album. This is an album that is one of my personal favorites by Metallica. It was a turning point in Metallica's career, which really brought them into the mainstream of music in general. They were a very popular thrash metal band, but then they just broke right into the mainstream of music as a whole. Like, top 40 stations were playing songs like Into Sandman. And this was a turning point just because the record label that they were with gave them a producer who introduced different ideas of, writing music into their sort of creative process, and they were very hesitant about it, but they went with it, and the payoff, I feel like, for them is extraordinary. So off this album, I mentioned Enter Sandman, like the most probably popular Metallica song of all time, if not the most popular, metal song of all time at this point. Sad But True, and Nothing Else Matters. These are some really good songs. So the Black Album, also the self-titled Metallica album. Here's another personal favorite of mine, Deathbat's Death Album. I can talk for a million years about the cartoon Metalocalypse, but I'm just going to talk about this album specifically as a musical entity. Now, the Death Album is the first album by Death Clock. My favorite thing about this album is that I really like every song on this album. There's not one song that I totally dislike. You got amazing songs like Mermaider, got Castrated Kron, Briefcase Full of Guts, The Lost Vikings, and Go Into the Water. Death album by Death Clock. Last one I'm going to talk about in this video is Get Heavy by Lordi. This is Lordi's first album. You can see with this band, a lot of their music, even though that they are a more quote-unquote current band, they have a lot of more classic influences. Bands like Kiss and Twisted Sister, you can definitely see the influence that this band has, mixed in with classic horror stories like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. This band's music is basically a love letter to all of classic metal and to horror. Some songs I recommend off this album are Dynamite Tonight, my favorite song off this album, and Get Heavy, which I feel like this is sort of, it makes me think of like, you know, some sort of high speed, like Speed Racer style race. I don't know why, I just really like that song for that reason. In the next video, part 3, I'm going to be discussing more recommendations of mine, and after Rachel we'll talk more about getting more deep into the heavy metal sort of community. So, until next time everybody, stay brutal.